extraordinary meeting in memory of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. I'll draw your attention to the agenda. We start off with some announcements that are actually on your agenda. I don't believe I need to read them out, but hopefully you've been able to have a look at the various instructions about webcasting, apologies, and minutes that will be held over till the next meeting. So thank you for that. So, Honorary Aldermen, County Councillors, honoured guests, good morning and welcome. It is with great sorrow that we gather today to mourn the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. On behalf of Hertfordshire County Council and the people of Hertfordshire, I have written to the King's Private Secretary, Sir Edward Young, to request that our sincere condolences and gratitude for the lifetime of service and devotion given by Her Majesty the Queen are passed to our new sovereign, King Charles III. The thoughts of everyone in Hertfordshire are with the royal family at this time of grief. But although we meet today at a moment of enormous sadness, it is also a unique opportunity for the Chamber to reflect upon Her Majesty's remarkable life. Our late sovereign has been a part of all of the lives for most of us. You'll probably hear today from a couple of people who remember the Princess Elizabeth when she became Queen in 1952. Her Majesty set an example of devotion to public duty par excellence and was one of the most incredible people there has ever been. Her extraordinary qualities shone for 70 years on the throne, navigating wars, financial and humanitarian disasters, and even a global pandemic. When she said, "We will meet again," it gave comfort to the nation, and we believed her. I'm sure we'll be reflecting on some of her visits to Hertfordshire this morning. What a blessing we were able to celebrate the Platinum Jubilee this summer in so many different ways. It was the perfect opportunity for Her Majesty to see quite how loved she was and how grateful Hertfordshire communities were for her steadfast reign, our rock, our anchor. Hertfordshire has already become one of the most successful counties in terms of the Queen's Green Canopy project, with a number of trees we have planted and others that we have pledges to plant this autumn. I'm sure this pleased Her Majesty immensely. Whilst we mourn with the royal family and the people of Hertfordshire and others far beyond, we give thanks as our county council to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth for her extraordinary life and work. God save the King.
God save the King.
So before I ask leaders to give group leaders to give their tributes, I would ask you please all to join me in 2 minutes silence. Please stand, thank you. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you very much, Joe, and good luck with the service on Sunday. Thank you. Service at All Saints here at 2 o'clock. So now I would like to invite the Leader of the Council, Richard Roberts, please, to commence with tributes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Can I just start by saying how grateful I am for all of us who are here today at such short notice when there are so many other commitments going on, and also to absolutely appreciate that those who aren't here have good reason and, for example, pre-planned holidays and all sorts of other reasons that are perfectly acceptable. So there is no problem for not being here. Chairman, just reflecting on the Jubilee that you raised in your words and the vision in green, which was the last time we saw the Queen in the balcony at Buckingham Palace, overlooking the crowds who are in London. Just superb. Thank you for that memory. My own personal memory, it wasn't quite sure when I was stood on top of the ladder lighting the beacon whether that might be the last thing I was about to do, but I survived. Just a few words from me, and then I was going to read the poem from Simon Armitage, the Poet Laureate. Last Thursday was a real shock, and I and many others didn't see it coming, despite the evidence staring us in the face. The Queen, seen greeting her 15th new Prime Minister on the Tuesday, was extremely frail, and despite her radiant smile, was obviously struggling physically. I was far more emotional at her passing than I'd imagined, and felt that a part of our national fabric had been torn away, diminishing our nation, our country. I was about to give a speech in Watford when the news came through. So with grief visible all around, we had a 2-minute silence, said a prayer, and I suggested we went home to be with our families. It was and will be remembered as a sad day, and we won't forget where we were or what we were doing. But reflecting now, a few days later, I feel that the new King has struck just the right note of continuity, warmth, and genuine love and affection for his mother and our country. He comes across as someone the nation can take to, and perhaps, just perhaps, a new King with a new government, I'm not trying to be controversial, can give the nation a lift now and in the coming months, which we know could be so difficult for many. So we, as the King and the royal family, grieve for a monarch of all our lifetime, or most of our lifetime. We look forward to an era to move on and build a new spirit for our 21st century country. My personal memories of the Queen are relatively few. I was at the county show in Shropshire during the Silver Jubilee, when a policeman threw a rope in front of us and stopped us to allow the Queen to walk by. This is close. I was 12 and probably thought that would happen at everywhere that I went. But actually, it was nearly 40 years later that I was that I met the Queen at the Lister Hospital, where it was opening a new wing. She wasn't having a knee op. The smell of the new paint, as always, a vibrant crowd, and a nervous, almost silent, welcoming party. This very tiny lady stood before us, looking a little bit lost and probably thinking she'd like a cup of tea and or needing Paddington Bear. I thought how lonely she looked. That sums up Her Majesty carrying out her duties, turning up hundreds of times a year to heap praise and her presence on projects up and down the land. From the start to the very end, she carried a steadfast view of selfless duty, and we loved her for it. Even after Prince Philip died, after COVID, she returned to her duties and carried on. I am optimistic King Charles will in his way forge his path of duty, no less sincere than our late Queen. The proclamation last Sunday was a triumph, and I want to pass my personal thanks to all those staff that made it happen, who on top of everything else they were doing, and I think the Chief Executive would describe our organisation as running hot, they delivered the most amazing and perfect event for us to proclaim the new King of the country. And if you'll indulge me, I'd just like to read the poem by Simon Armitage, the Poet Laureate, which was to the Queen, called Elizabeth, Elizabeth. And for those that you don't know, and you'll probably guess as you listen to this, each line starts with the letter of her name. Evening will come, however determined the late afternoon. Limes and oaks in their last green flush, pearled in September mist. I've conjured a lily to light these hours, a token of thanks. Zones and auras of soft glare framing the brilliant globes. A promise made and kept for life, that was your gift. Because of which, here is a gift in return. Glove work to some. Each shining bonnet guarded by stern lance-like leaves. The country loaded itself, its whole self into your slender hands. Hands that can rest, now relieved of a century's weight. Evening has come. Rain on the black locks and the dark Munros. Lily of the valley, a namesake almost, a favourite flower. Interlaced with your famous bouquets, the zeal and forceful grace of its lanterns, each inflorescence, a silent bell disguising a singular voice, a blurred new day. Breaks uncrowned on remote peaks and public parks, and everything turns on these luminous petals and deep roots. This lily that thrives between spire and tree, whose brightness holds and glows beyond the life and border of its bloom. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. I certainly hadn't heard that Armitage poem. It was absolutely beautiful. But thank you very much. I now would like to turn to Councillor Giles Medharhurst, who I believe is joining us remotely. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman, on this solemn occasion. Firstly, thank you to the officers and the council to allow me to join remotely from some distance, I have to say. I hope you can hear and see me respectively. Clearly, just over a week is a very long time in politics, and like Richard, I can remember vividly what I was doing last Thursday and at 6:30. As leader of the Liberal Democrat group and the leader of the loyal opposition, clearly it's my duty to pay great respect to Her Majesty the Queen. It seems strange that just over a week ago we had a Queen and a different Prime Minister, and so much has changed. But so much has changed that we should actually pay our dutiful respect to a life of dedicated service to our country and the Commonwealth as we unite as a nation to mourn the Queen's passing, and to show her our gratitude for a lifetime of outstanding service. I'm an Elizabethan child, like probably many in the chamber, and Queen Elizabeth II guided this country through a period of great change during her 70-year reign, taking the United Kingdom from the post-war years of the 1950s when nationalism was still in place and homosexual acts were illegal. But it was legal to have notices saying no dogs, no colours, no Irish, to the modern, global and diverse and very accepting nation we are today. And of course, the wonders of modern technology enable me to join you today from 1,600 miles away, as it did enable the Queen to engage throughout the pandemic with all the subjects, not only of the United Kingdom, but the Commonwealth. And throughout this change, some of it indeed led by the Queen herself, no more debutante balls anymore, the Queen decreed in 1958. We have moved to the modern age. Her Majesty's steady and unceasing presence showed unwavering care and leadership of her people across the globe. Queen Elizabeth's life was an example and an inspiration to us all. And we also remember the Queen was a proud, loving mother, grandmother and great-grandmother. It was clearly service before self. For many millions of people, just seeing the Queen was the highlight, and for those lucky enough to meet and exchange a few words, even more special. A lifetime experience you do not forget. I, like many others, have served the Crown from my signing of the Official Secrets Act way back in 1975 to receiving in March 1990 an official Royal Commission of the Crown as an officer for Her Majesty's Customs and Excise, something I will treasure forever. However, I've also been very fortunate, yes, to attend Buckingham Palace garden parties, see Her Majesty and indeed other members of the royal family at a distance, and even met a few of them. But the greatest joy to me personally was in 1996. As Mayor of Harrow, I got to meet Her Majesty the Queen at the official opening of the University of Westminster Harrow campus. Splendidly dressed in royal blue, with of course a matching hat and handbag. That trademark Queen Elizabeth smile was there for all of us to see. And as we know, it can melt the strongest of determined men at the knees. We spoke about the Queen Mother, who was staying at the time at Bentley Priory in Stanmore, as she had been unwell. We wished her well. The response was so normal, but kind in thanking me for being so thoughtful. That handshake and moment stays to run forever, as it has done to the thousands the Queen has met. Then, much to my surprise and delight, a few years later, I was invited to an official reception at St James's Palace and was able to take my mother and stepfather. As the evening drew to a close, the Queen and the Duke proceeded along the line of us with a brief goodbyes and thank you. Again, a few words of thanks and that smile as the Queen moved on. Then I found the Duke in conversation with my stepfather over my right shoulder. My stepfather had worn his war medals, which included ones for the Atlantic convoy. The Duke had spotted this and had asked about his service, which had included him travelling to Malta. The Duke had likewise served in the convoy. It was clear they were reminiscing when I heard a slight cough. It may even have been a bit, but I didn't actually personally hear that from Her Majesty, who was by now at least 3 or 4 guests down the line. The Duke finished up his conversation and moved on, saying something like, "Great to see you." It was just there were no airs, no graces from either of them. They were just perfect people. More recently, in other roles, like many others, it's been a great pleasure to assist with the planting of the Queen's green canopy, in my case, the Lord Lieutenant, and a feature ginkgo tree in Leavesden. Another great inspired idea, the green canopy, that will all benefit for future generations. As well, of course, lighting the Jubilee beacon in Abbots Lane on an evening that gave such joy to so many, as you celebrated a landmark time which we hope would just go on and on, and it was not to be. So I suppose that is the one word that sums up Queen Elizabeth: joy. She gave joy to me, the nation, and the whole world. And like so many, I shed tears, whether being on the Mall on Saturday, indeed, as Richard knows from signing the condolences book here, where you are at County Hall on Friday. My thoughts and prayers are with the royal family at this sad time, but they will know how great Queen Elizabeth was, not just as a mother, but as the mother of the nation. My deepest sympathies have, of course, gone to His Majesty King Charles III. And as a nation, we will unite behind our new King. We trust and pray that throughout his reign, uphold the dedication to duty and service so faithfully carried out by Queen Elizabeth for 70 years. And it's quite clear from the start that's been made, he intends to follow in her footsteps. They are indeed, may have been small feet, but big footsteps for our nation. And I hope, Chairman, perhaps the recording of this particular tribute council meeting can be sent to Buckingham Palace and the King, so he may see, and indeed we respectfully thank the King for the dedication and service that the Queen has shown. God save the King. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Giles Medhurst. I think that's a splendid idea to send a copy of this meeting to the palace and the king. And thank you so much for your memories and the highlighting the word is joy. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to move to Councillor Billing, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief, and being me, I'll also be a little bit personal, because personal anecdotes seem to be what always come to my mind on important occasions. I too was surprised by the depth of my emotions last Thursday. I think many of us were. It seemed strange that this person was 96 years old, and obviously very frail, but it was still deeply shocking that she died, and that was strange. But my personal anecdote is that on May the 30th, 2012, my husband, who some of you knew, had a fit and collapsed at Malaga Airport. And there then ensued 9 or 10 days of him being cared for in the Malaga University Hospital, whilst I lived in the Holiday Inn Express Malaga Airport, which is not a great hotel, but members of my family came out to support me. And during that week or so more, they found the brain tumour, which was actually going to cause my own husband's death 14 months later. Now, that might seem very far removed from the Queen, but it wasn't, because at the time she was doing some extraordinary things on boats up and down the Thames in pouring rain. One I recall that I watched from the Holiday Inn Express, Malaga Airport, and her husband was ill too. And I watched on this television and I related to it very much, actually, because she had to deal with stuff. Now, I know she had a staff of people to help her deal with stuff rather more than I did, but still, she will have been worried, frightened, disappointed by what was happening, and the fact that she had to conduct the rest of her Diamond Jubilee events pretty much without him. And so I came home and we went through the beginnings of the medical stuff that you go through on these occasions. But on June the 14th, I am getting there. On June the 14th, the Queen visited Hitchin as part of her Diamond Jubilee events, and I had the joy and privilege of being part of a teeming town square full of people, school children, doing royalist things with flags and generally having a marvellous time in the most astonishing sunshine that I can ever recall. And I had to pull myself together, just as the Queen had to pull herself together and realise that she was going to do these events on her own. And I met her on my own turf, if you like, in Hitchin Town Square. And I just wanted to share the 2 or 3 things that I was absolutely struck by on that day. First of all, was the fact that I had to pull myself together and ended up enjoying myself hugely because it was such a fun day. But about the Queen herself, I was amazed, absolutely amazed when she got out of her car on Marketplace. You're not really allowed to take a car on Marketplace, but we made an exception for her, that she was incredibly tiny. All of you know this, but I just wanted to share my memory of it. With a smile sort of bigger than she could possibly have because she was so tiny. And her smile was actually bigger than the person. And I found that amazing. She wore, and I have endless photographs, if you'd like me to show them to you later on, she wore a most stunning lilac outfit. And Hitchin thronged with people and sunshine and the enormity of the Queen's smile. Now, I don't know how she kept that up for so many years, in so many places, with so many dull people all lining up to shake her hand and looked terribly, terribly pleased to meet her, which we were. I don't know how she did it. I couldn't have done it. Most people couldn't have done it. And I'm just so privileged to have had that experience and that opportunity. And I wanted to share it with you. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Billing. I think the smile bigger than the person and that stoic bravery is a wonderful thing to share. So thank you very much for that. Councillor Crystal.
Sorry. Thanks, Chair. Unlike many of you, I've never had the honour of meeting the Queen in my short time in public service, but I share, I think, our feelings of deep shock, upset, and from last week, and it's continued a sort of surprising feeling of loss that's continued, which I'm shocked about. I think I've got no further words to add. I think for me personally, the image of her coffin coming down from Northolt to Buckingham Palace earlier this week, down the A40 in the pouring rain, with cars at a standstill and miles of people just standing in silence. I think that says far more than any words that I can certainly string together. And so I won't try.
Thank you for that, reminding us of that image, Councillor Crystal. Absolutely astonishing. Just people leaving their cars, standing by the side of the road. So thank you for reminding us of that. Now, I would like to now open comments to the chamber, please. You can electronically, probably best actually if you put the electronically, and then I won't miss any of you. And if I do, then obviously put your hand up if I've missed you. So the first surprisingly to hit the button was Councillor Bright. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman. In the mid-1990s, when I was still in my 20s, believe it or not, I was working as a press officer for a Member of Parliament, Sir Colin Shepherd. And one week he said to me, he said, Maurice, I've got a very busy diary. He said, would you mind attending an event for me? Because I've got a clash. And the event was to celebrate Commonwealth Day. And Her Majesty the Queen was going to be in attendance, but I shouldn't worry because there would be hundreds of people there and it was unlikely I'd get to see Her Majesty. And when I got there were indeed hundreds of people there. But one of them I spotted was someone that I knew very well, someone that many of you will know very well. He was a local religious minister at the time, and he was there to represent the Chief Rabbi's office, and it was Rabbi, former County Councillor Alan Plancy. It had been Alan Plancy who had married me and my first wife just a few years before that, but I'd forgiven him for that by then. And as the security staff divided the room to form an open area for the Queen to walk around to meet people, he beckoned to me and he said, come stand with me, Maurice, come stand with me, which I did. And she was coming down the line and I could see the Queen approaching, and she was taking her time to speak to some people in the line. And she stopped at Rabbi Plancy and she started talking to him, and they recognized each other, obviously from a previous event he had attended for the Chief Rabbi. And just watching her, just little bit in front of me, there was an extraordinary aura around her. And I couldn't believe that almost 2 decades after I sat on a pavement as a junior school pupil, waving a flag on the streets with my school chums as the Queen's car drove past, me trying to catch a glimpse of her. I think actually Dr. David Owen was in the car at the time as well, that I was now this close to one of the most cherished and respected people in the country, if not the world. And then Alan Plancy, in only the way that Alan Plancy could do, he turned around and said, Your Majesty, he said, may I introduce a friend of mine who works in Parliament, which I'm sure was against what he was supposed to say and do. And the Queen looked at me and she smiled and she asked for whom I worked. And I explained Sir Colin Shepherd, who was very well known for his Commonwealth work. And she asked me to pass on her best wishes to Sir Colin, and then she was gone. She moved on. And I felt this extraordinary rush of adrenaline, like I'd won an Olympic medal or even a BAFTA. And it was extraordinary that one person could have such an effect, but that's what the Queen did. As a broadcast journalist and with others, I filmed the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh on the 50th anniversary of VE Day the next year. And I have been thankfully privileged and honoured to meet several members of the royal family since. But meeting the Queen on that day, when I was 28, was a very special moment in my life. And I shall remember it always. And I'm sure everyone who has ever met her across her 70 years of reign will do so likewise. May God bless the memory of our late Queen Elizabeth, and may God save our new King, and long may he reign. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Bright. I can envisage you with a BAFTA, but maybe not an Olympic medal. Maybe when you were 21. Lovely. So I would now, actually, I'm going to take someone from up there. I'm going to take Councillor Barnard, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My personal recollections, excuse me, I am old enough to remember crowding into a neighbour's house to watch the coronation on the only television in the street, and then sitting on my parents' bedroom windowsill to watch her go by. Of course, the coronation coach didn't travel through Stopsley and Luton. In 2003, as chairman of North Arts Council, I first met Her Majesty in Stevenage as a guest when she, accompanied by Prince Philip, opened the new North Arts College. I spoke briefly with the charming Prince on that occasion. In 2012, as Judy Billing has mentioned, and I as a councillor was privileged to meet her and share her constant warm smile. I've been fortunate to attend Buckingham Palace garden parties where the warm-hearted Queen greeted so many of her subjects. I heard at lunchtime on the 8th of September that her physicians were gravely concerned about her, and then saw her nearest family rush to Balmoral to be by her side. The writing was on the wall, and when soon after 6 p.m. her passing was announced, I confessed that the lump in my throat became tears. Queen Elizabeth II was unique in every way. 70 years of selfless devotion to the Commonwealth and all of her subjects, never swaying politically or in any other way, just simply striving to safeguard their subjects and guide them safely through their lifetimes, both here and abroad. I believe that her beloved Philip sent down a message to her as her body slowly failed her. He would have said, "Your job is done, you can do no more. Now come and join me in restful paradise. You leave a broken-hearted world. Grateful for your service, come rest with me." Elizabeth joined him. Rest in peace, Your Majesty.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barnard. I hadn't realised you look so young that you were actually in short trousers for the coronation. That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. I would now like to ask, please, Councillor Bolton next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Today we are here in great sadness to mark the end of the reign of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, perhaps Elizabeth the Great, with our respect and gratitude, and to give thanks for her long and dutiful years as our monarch. She was Queen for all of my life except the first 8 days, so I can remember no other, and that will be true of many in this chamber, although not everybody. The Bible tells us that the wise man builds his house upon a rock, and it is on that rock that the monarchy has been heading the realm of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and overseas territories for centuries. For the last 70 years, Her Majesty has been part of that rock upon which our Constitution has so depended. Prime ministers have come and gone, sometimes in quick succession. Political parties wax and wane. In some other countries, dictators and despots rise to power and then leave destruction and devastation behind them. The Queen, however, was steadfast in her duty. Duty to this country, sacred duty to the Church, and duty to all people. She put country and duty before self and showed that this was her intention even before she ascended the throne. Duty, that is a word we don't often hear today. We hear of rights, we hear of expectations, we hear because I'm worth it. But duty is not popular or modern. Yet duty is what Her Majesty carried out for all those years, and of course we became used to it. So much so that we somehow thought she would always be there, which is why her death is such a shock to us all, and so traumatic, and why we are here to mourn her this morning. I was not fortunate enough to meet the Queen, although many of you have. But from all those who did, we hear of appreciation for her wisdom, her kindness, her extraordinary memory, and her wit. She was truly a queen of all her people. We shall miss her terribly and can be comforted by her long and glorious reign that enhanced the monarchy and has left it safe in the hands of King Charles. Your Majesty, you have earned your rest 10 times over. To paraphrase the prayer, Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace according to thy word, for her eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared before the face of all people. And I would just end by saying, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Councillor Bolton. I think the words duty, rock, and the great that you've highlighted certainly sum up Her Majesty. Thank you so much for that. I would now like to ask Councillor Brass, please.
Chairman, thank you very much indeed. On behalf of the residents of North Bushey, whom I represent, can I share their sadness as we mourn the loss of a very great woman. And as the previous speaker said, I also call her Elizabeth the Great. As the world around us has changed and politicians and even, dare I say, county councillors come and go, the Queen was our constant. Her presence will be greatly missed. She represented duty and courage, as well as warmth and compassion. She was a living reminder of our collective past, and for me, certainly of my parents' generation, and their sacrifice for our freedom. As a religious woman, she'd have been familiar, I'm sure, with the book of Proverbs, attributed to the wise King Solomon. A woman of worth, it says, who can find? Her price is far above rubies. And I suspect that the late Queen was exactly the sort of person Solomon had in mind when he wrote those immortal words. Madam Chairman, would you allow me to share a few personal reflections of my connections with Her Majesty? My earliest memory of which was in 1953, not of meeting the Queen, but of thanking my dad for getting a television for the first time so we could all watch the coronation, and all the family joined together and the friends and neighbours came to our house. I seem to remember it was a tiny picture and he had some strange plastic shield which he put over it to try and magnify the picture. Didn't work at all. It actually distorted it. But thanks to the Queen, my childhood was transformed by the magic of television, and I thank her for that. And my next occasion, I suppose my next connection, was when I was appointed 22 years ago to be one of her judges. And every written decision I made, the paper on which I wrote my decisions carried the royal coat of arms, to signify that justice was being dispensed in the name of the monarch, and rightly so. Perhaps an amusing story, which I might indulge myself by telling you, was a few years later in St. James's Palace. Somebody mentioned a reception, and I too was at a reception there. I can't remember, frankly, what it was. It could have been a judicial occasion, but we were all standing in a row and in little clusters, and I was there with other people, and Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh were going down the row, and we all had name tags on us. And the Duke of Edinburgh came up to me, and he saw my name, and he said, "Brass?" I said, "Yes, Your Highness." I said, it's my name. And then he said, where there's muck, there's brass. And he thought that was hysterically funny, and he was guffawing with laughter. And the Queen was just standing behind him. And she looked, didn't say anything, but she looked at me as if to say, let's put up with him, I'm sorry. And I respected that view as well. And we both smiled together. Then my last and most memorable recollection was when I was invited, greatly honoured, with 4 other officers, honorary officers of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, of which I was then a vice president, to a private audience with the Queen in Windsor Castle in her drawing room to honour the 350th anniversary of the readmission of Jews to England by, dare I say his name today, Oliver Cromwell, because we spent at least a couple of hours chatting with the Queen, and she was interested to know where we had all come from, where our families had originated, and everyone got the same feeling as I did when she spoke to us, that she really cared what we had to say. She was, as they say, a very good listener. The Queen had recently returned, I think a week or so previously, from a visit to Jordan. And I plucked up courage and I said to her, Mom, I said, why have you never visited the Holy Land? I said, a religious woman, would you not have wanted to go and see the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, to visit the city of Bethlehem or Nazareth? And Her Majesty made it clear to me in a very tactful and diplomatic and polite way that her visits were arranged by the Foreign Office, and therefore she didn't really have much say in the matter. And subsequently, many times we got in touch with what we call the Camel Corps at the Foreign Office, and they were quite clear they would never let her set foot in Israel. And that, I think, is a source of great regret to me, that in her many overseas trips, she never actually set foot in the Holy Land. By contrast, King Charles and Prince William have been welcomed in Israel on many occasions, and hopefully will continue to visit in the future. Chairman, in my faith, we say to bereaved relatives who have lost a loved one that we wish them a long life. And I conclude, therefore, by wishing His Majesty King Charles, and of course to his siblings, a long life. And God save the King.
Thank you so much for that very personal memory of meeting Her Majesty, and to remind us that she was a living reminder of our collective past. I think that's beautifully said, and I think it's something that perhaps is what we are all quite shocked about, actually, how she embodied our total past. So thank you so much for that. Now I'm going to go back up to the screen, please, and I'm going to invite Francis Button, ex-chairman of Hertfordshire County Council. Francis.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this meeting today. And I'm not so much going to share personal reflections as to talk about the time when I was honoured to be chairman of Hertfordshire County Council for the 2 years 2015 to 2017, which included the Queen's 90th birthday in 2016. As a direct consequence, of her birthday celebrations, during those 2 years, Hertfordshire received an astonishing number of royal visits, which briefly included the Duke of Gloucester coming to Northwood, the Duchess of Gloucester coming to the British Polio Fellowship in Watford, the Duke of York came to Ashridge House, the Princess Royal came to the Citizens Advice Bureau in South Oxley and the Save the Children shop in Tring. The Duchess of Cornwall came to the Royal Veterinary College in Radlett, and the Duke of Edinburgh came to the University of Hertfordshire. And, Chairman, I practised my courtesy. In addition, there were 2 outstanding memorable events. On the 15th of May, Hertfordshire celebrated, and I'm just trying to scroll this down for the moment. On the 16th of May, Hertfordshire celebrated the Queen's 90th birthday when a beacon was lit at Hertford Castle by the then Lord Lieutenant of Hertfordshire, Lady Verulam. On the day, a huge party, open to all, took place in the castle grounds, and Hertford has an absolutely delightful castle. People brought their own picnics. They had great fun. And there was the most magnificent cake on display, which I believe you can all now see. There was much flag waving. I remember it as a bright but cold day. And as dusk fell, so did the temperature. So whilst we were cold, we had a very clear sky. There were short speeches from the chair of Hertford Town Council, from me on behalf of the County Council, and from Lady Verulam as representative of the monarch in Hertfordshire. Then, to huge cheers, the beacon was lit on the top of the castle, and we sang with gusto the National Anthem. There was then a series of lighting effects on the castle, including, as I think you can see, the cake, and you can see the beacon just to the left of the tower. There was also a picture of Her Majesty inspecting her troops, but I think possibly my favourite, and I hope it's going to move on in just a moment, was the Union Jack, there we go, the Union Jack. And these all show the party going on in the grounds meanwhile. The cake was cut and handed round and was absolutely delicious. The party, I have to say, was still ongoing when I left. It was a wonderful evening. But the even more exciting event had taken place 10 days earlier, on the 6th of May 2016, when Her Majesty the Queen visited Berkhamsted School to celebrate their 475th anniversary. Those memories are magical. Berkhamsted School is in the centre of the town, so of course the high street was closed for hours and hours beforehand. Diversions were in place. We were given strict instructions about arrival times, be in place at least half an hour before, and a warning that congestion approaching as you approach the town would be considerable. So of course you get there ages in advance just to be on the safe side. You aren't supposed to give lifts in the chairman's car, which happily was going to be allowed through the barriers. But dare I say it, my husband and I had permission to give a lift to one of the governors of Berkhamsted School, who lives near me and had been seriously concerned how she was going to get through. So the high street was cordoned off, police were everywhere. One of my abiding memories was that everyone, families, grandparents, children, super cool teenagers, everybody was smiling and was so happy. The sun shone, and it was one of those perfect May days when England is absolutely at its very best. As we were early, we and other early birds were encouraged to walk up and down the high street and talk to the crowds. Everyone was chatting, waving their flags, laughing, cheering everything and anything that moved. There was bunting everywhere. It was just such a happy day. And that's what the Queen achieved so very well. She made people happy. Just waiting for her made everyone smile. She had such a glorious smile. And I love Judy Billings' comment, the size of her smile is bigger than the person. When you line up to be presented, there are loads of security people on walkie-talkies checking how far away the royal visitor is. So we were told 10 minutes, 5 minutes. The Queen's car drove down the very middle of the high street, and for those who know Berkhamsted, pulled up at the entrance to St. Peter's Church, where we'd lined up in strict order to welcome our visitor. Lady Verulam, the then Lord Lieutenant, presented first the High Sheriff, who was then Stelio Stefanou, and then his wife. As chairman of the County Council, I was next, and then my husband as consort. Then the chairs of the various districts, boroughs and towns. The Queen was then driven, we walked of course, she was driven into the school grounds for her visit, accompanied by Lady Verulam. Yesterday, I spoke to Richard Thompson, Assistant Vice Principal of External Relations at Berkhamsted School. He was there on the day, and he's kindly let me have a couple of the school's photos to share. Richard Thompson said, This occasion was historically significant for both the school and the local community. The reigning monarch has always served as the patron of Berkhamsted School, but the school had never had the privilege of a visit by a reigning monarch. To have a visit by Her Majesty in the period during which the nation celebrated the Queen's own landmark 90th birthday was an added honour. It was great that not only pupils from across the whole school participated in some element of the visit, but also the whole community, including representatives of local charities and of St. Peter's Church. They were fully engaged. Berkhamsted literally came to a standstill, the streets filled with cheering crowds. And he'd added, "It was a proud moment for me as head of Berkhamsted Boys' School, as I was at that time, to celebrate such a wonderful occasion." And Richard Thompson and his colleagues tell me that the school has photos all over the walls showing the royal visit. My reflections on that visit: Queen Elizabeth II was in Berkhamsted for their 475th birthday, but it was clearly planned several years earlier to coincide with her 90th birthday celebrations. She was a remarkable and an inspirational 90-year-old. As Richard Thompson said, Berkhamsted came to a standstill. Everyone wanted to be there, to wave their flags and to cheer. The impact of her visit on the community was huge. The traffic impact on the community was huge, but when she left, it was minimised because she left in the royal helicopter. My reflections generally, I can't add any more to what everybody else has said. Hertfordshire had a glorious 2 years with so many royal visits. Everybody remembers seeing, and even better, meeting royalty. And everybody who was in Berkhamsted on that day will never forget it. It's a tribute to the Queen's lifetime service and devotion to us all. It was an honour to represent Hertfordshire County Council. Thank you very much, and God save the King.
Well, thank you very much, Francis, and thank you for showing us how lucky Hertfordshire is to have had so many visits and those beautiful photographs. I think perhaps the magnificent cake and Lady Verulam's hat, probably a dead heat. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. So I'm going to move on to Councillor Buckmaster, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There was a contrast in the heights of Lady Verulam and the Queen, I noticed. She's actually my height, so you can understand from the pictures why that's the case. I think partly mentioned earlier, but can you imagine at your coming of age, embarking on an apprenticeship and saying, I pledge to do this for as long as I shall live? Very much a vow of faith, and extraordinary to do so at the highest level for so long. The knowledge gained and the wisdom able to be shared, and particularly with her, I'll say 14 prime ministers because there wasn't time for the 15th, but that was certainly of benefit to the nation. I'm certain that influence came to bear in the constitutional role of warning and caution. I'm sure there were many occasions when the Queen's view came to bear. Much has been said of the Queen's smile. It was genuine, born out of a feeling of comfort in being among her subjects and fulfilling her destiny. I always knew when the Queen's actual birthday was. My mother was 2 days older and Prince Philip a couple of weeks older than my father, so I very much connected with that generation, and one that learned from the dark days of the war years the importance of reconciliation and growth. And I think, as Judy and Richard implied earlier, we feel such a great loss because we also have lost a huge connection to our past, and perhaps we were unprepared for that. I have been fortunate to attend a palace garden party and see the Queen, but my best personal memory of the Queen was in the Jubilee year of 1977, I had just finished my final exams in Cardiff. I was out for the day with a friend, and we noticed many scouts and guides lining the roadside and cheering every car that passed by. We stopped off at a roadside cafe and bought 2 teas. We took them outside, and soon the Queen passed by in her car. We raised our mugs in honour of her, and of course she smiled back in that wonderful and natural way. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that beautiful image of your mugs toasting Her Majesty. And I think the comment saying the smile came from the comfort of her being amongst her subjects is brilliant, absolutely wonderful. I'm sure you're right. Thank you so much. I'm now going to ask Councillor Kingsbury to give a tribute. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, for the opportunity to speak on such a sad and historic time, and thank you for arranging this meeting for that purpose today. Most of us here do not remember a time when the Queen wasn't our monarch. Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, was the longest serving head of state. 70 years is such a long time. She welcomed 15 prime ministers, and the latest so close to her passing. I remember my father, who had seen King George VI in London, telling me about the King, and it all seemed so far in the past even then. I recall as a boy the red, white and blue of the Silver Jubilee in 1977. As a teenage boy, it felt like the Queen had been reigning for so long. Little did we know that she'd have a gold, diamond and platinum Jubilee many years later. Unfortunately, unlike many here, I've never been privileged to meet the Queen. I know some here have, and that they're sharing lasting memories today. But somehow, I know we all feel that we knew her and suffer the loss of someone so long in our lives. We saw so much of the Queen from appearances, speeches and the media. The monarchy gives us an institution that is above politics, a permanent and defined head of state with a known line of succession. It gives stability as prime ministers and governments come and go. The Queen brought the formalities of state to us all, whilst modernising as times changed. Formality, tradition, a dedication to duty, as well as a warmth and humour. The latter shown so well by acting with Daniel Craig in a James Bond clip and seemingly parachuting into the stadium on the Olympics in the Olympic ceremony in 2012, as well as having tea and marmalade sandwiches with Paddington just this year on a Jubilee. It was an honour to attend the proclamation on Sunday here and at Welwyn Hatfield. And speaking a little bit of Welwyn Hatfield, the Queen had strong associations with the borough over many years. In 1959, she opened a campus of the Royal Veterinary College and visited the QE2 in Welwyn Garden City for its opening 4 years later. In 2003, the Queen, accompanied by the Duke of Edinburgh, visited nearby Nebworth Park, just outside Welwyn Hatfield. And in 2012, as part of her Diamond Jubilee tour, she visited Hatfield House and planted an oak tree to mark the occasion. I remember the Mayor of Welwyn Hatfield at the time saying how she was honoured to sit next to the Queen over lunch and speak to her. I'm sure the new King will be welcomed to much of Hertfordshire in the coming years, and I wish King Charles III a long and successful reign. God save the King.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kingsbury. And you're absolutely right to remind us that each time there was a big Jubilee, we were all amazed and joyful, and then there was another and another. And in fact, for those of you been in the chamber for quite a while, at the Golden Jubilee, there's an actual special link put in here of Her Majesty, and on the back there's one which would have been from the Diamond Jubilee. So Leader of the Council knows that I'm looking for a little bit more on here. So we'll see what we can do for King Charles. So I'm going to move now to Councillor Muir, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I first saw the Queen at age of 8, sitting on my father's shoulders at Trafalgar Square on her way to coronation. I've met, as a professional photographer for 58 years, I've met the Queen twice as the photographer. I will tell you just of one of those two occasions when she opened the Letchworth Garden City Leisure Centre. I was booked by the Letchworth Corporation to be the only roving photographer. There were the press at certain points, but they couldn't move from those points. And I was briefed by one of the Queen's staff that I was not to speak to her unless she spoke to me, and I mustn't go in front of her, always behind her, and so forth. The tour was supposed to be for an hour and a half, but it's well over 2 hours. I had the privilege to photograph her when she spoke to all the officials lined up in the various rooms. When I first had the occasion to photograph her with the first of the dignitaries, she actually, I didn't hear what she said, but she told a person to look round at the camera, which I thought was very good. And she did that all the way through. At the end, she signed the book of her visit, and I bowed my head to her. I didn't actually speak, but I said, "Thank you very much, Majesty." And she could lip read, and she bowed her head and nodded to me. And I will always remember that occasion. I put all the photographs up in my shop window in Letchworth, and there was dozens and dozens and dozens of them. It filled the whole window. And the amount of people that stopped to look at those photographs, there was queues. And several people came in and asked me what I thought of the occasion. And what could I say? But it was marvellous. I'd just like to say that she is now going to join her husband and to be reunited with the Duke, and long live King Charles III. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
What a joyous morning, Councillor Murray. You actually got me, I'm afraid. To think of you on your father's shoulders at the coronation, it's just wonderful for us all to actually imagine that and to have you here today. So thank you so much for sharing that. Wow. Right, now to a young man, Councillor Thake, please.
Madam Chairman, were it that I was young, I celebrated my 80th birthday on Sunday, so I was unable to join you all for the proclamation, for which I am deeply saddened. How can you fail to be moved when, at the age of 9, Bertie, King George VI, sadly lost his battle with ill health and died, and the then Princess Elizabeth was instantly Queen of this wonderful country? She was, as you will all know or remember, from those of you who were that old, and those of you who read the accounts, I'm sure, over the last few days and weeks, she was in Kenya at Treetops when she acceded to the throne. And the reason I bring that back is Judy Billing triggered in my mind because I was also present at that wonderful occasion in Hitchin and was introduced to Her Majesty by Lady Dione, Countess Verulam, who is immensely tall and Her Majesty is immensely short, and in fact she made me look tall, God bless her. Anyway, the reason I refer to it is because on 2 occasions only in my long life can I remember Her Majesty not having that glorious, glorious smile. And of course, the first one was when she walked down the steps that aircraft with Philip behind her, returning to this country to pick up the mantle of Queen. And the second time, which still brings a tear to my eye, was the decommissioning of the Royal Yacht Britannia. And if you didn't know that that woman had a sense of duty and a sense of love and devotion and sensitivities, then you saw it, because even she was unable to maintain her composure, as we all believe that she never ever could lose it, but I think even she lost it then. The immense majesty and sombre of the King's funeral was contrasted in the following year, 1953, by the glorious and happy coronation. And like many, my father managed to procure a television set. Not many people in the street had it. And so, again, the families of our neighbours joined us. These are all boyhood memories which you never forget, never forget. And then, of course, through the years, as I grew and developed my business, I went into partnership with a firm whose head office was in Ascot. They ran the auctions at the Silver Ring in Ascot. And part of that, we had a box in the grandstand, which is now demolished, but we had one. And on many, many occasions, I was privileged to see Her Majesty and the processions coming up the Royal Mile, I beg your pardon, the straight. And I also saw her mother, the late Queen Mother, who also was quite small and came from just up the road from me, in St Paul's Walden. So you can't go through a lifetime without feeling sad that you've lost someone. And somehow she did manage to transcend that situation. I mean, she was the Queen, but somehow she was part of you, because she was part of this country, and we're part of this country. I also, like Francis, had the privilege of being chairman of this august authority and met many of the royals. But I never met her during that time. I met just about everybody else. But Hitchin on that gloriously hot summer day in a dark suit, when I think I nearly cooked, and she, cool, gladsome, winsome even for an elderly lady. What a wonderful occasion that was. You're all, His Majesty the King picks up a huge mantle. I'm sure he will do it well. She did it magnificently, and I'm proud to have managed to serve the people of Hertfordshire for even a small time during her time. Service, she was, her life, she dedicated it. Makes us look very small, I think, but then at least we were part of it. God bless her, and God save the King.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thake, and many congratulations on your modest 80 years compared with Her Majesty. But thank you so much for that. And I think it's a very good reminder about a little window we saw of her emotion. And she was absolutely right about the Royal Yacht Britannia, when we now see actually how helpful it was, what reach she had around the world and who she entertained on it. She knew that it was a tremendous loss for the whole nation. But that was a particular time, as we know. So now I'm going to move to Sharon Taylor, please. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman. And can I echo Councillor Roberts' thanks to the County Council officers who have worked so hard to make all these events possible, but also add my personal thanks to you, Chairman. Annie, you've led our mourning and our proclamation of our new King with great grace and compassion, and we're very grateful to you for that, so thank you. Your comments just now made me reflect that all of the commentary we've heard on social media, the interviews that have been done, the TV and radio broadcasts, we know that our Queen, she was very special to us, but she was also, as far as I'm concerned, the world's Queen. The tributes have shown us that everybody in the world considered her to be part of their life too. None of us will ever forget where we were when we heard the sad and momentous news that our dearly loved Queen Elizabeth II had died on Thursday, the 8th of September. For most of us, Queen Elizabeth's remarkable reign of 7 decades means she's the only Queen we have ever known. And our Queen has given us an extraordinary and exemplary life of service, duty, dignity and grace, national values which we all cherish so dearly. Of course, our history in Stevenage goes back many centuries, but it's Her Majesty's reign that is inextricably linked to the modern history of our new town. She made her first visit to Stevenage in 1959, just 7 years into her long reign, and with our town just 13 years from its inaugural charter. Her 1959 visit was joyous. She visited residents of a new town home in Wigram Way, and they had to give her a cup of tea. I'm not sure who was more terrified, the Queen or the residents of that house. And my daughter now lives in Wigram Way. She also opened our town centre. I was 3 years old and I still remember standing on Broughton Way, waving my little flag as her car went past and feeling that something totally wonderful was happening. She returned to Stevenage in 1995 to open our research centre at Glaxo, and in 2003 to open the wonderful new college. And my memory of that event was of my late and very wonderful friend Sherma Batson, who's also a former county councillor, was sitting next to the Queen at the lunch there. The lunch had been cooked by the students of North Herts College, and they did all the waiting at table and everything for that event. And that must have been really scary for them. But one at the starter for that meal was a very complicated and very brittle noodle nest, which took great care to eat without managing to get it all over everybody on the table next to you. And the Queen and Sherma, I was looking over at their table, and they were involved in conversation and laughing with each other as though they'd been best friends forever. It was a wonderful, wonderful day. And most recently, as others have mentioned, in 2012 on the Queen's Diamond Jubilee visit, where she opened our maternity unit. What struck us all on all those visits was the warmth and love of the crowds on every occasion when she visited Stevenage and indeed our county. Those of us who have been fortunate enough to meet our Queen are now fortunate indeed to have that indelible memory as part of our personal history. She always made you feel you were special and important to her, a truly incredible gift and skill. Her Majesty has been at the heart of our nation and the Commonwealth for all of our lives, and she has been in our hearts for all of ours. May she rest in eternal peace. I would also like to take the opportunity to offer my deepest and heartfelt condolences to King Charles and the whole royal family. He's had to take on this heavy mantle of monarchy while dealing with the personal loss of his beloved mother. I don't think anything you did or a lifelong training could prepare you for that. And I do hope that the outpouring of love, affection and respect for our Queen has been consoling to him and his family in these difficult and momentous days. And that the example of service and faith that she set will be his touchstone and support in his duties as our King. God save the King. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. And I think aren't we lucky that Stevenage has actually provided such a wonderful opportunity for Her Majesty to be so involved with its development and to come so many times. And I want to also commend you on your wonderful radio interview when you were explaining about that trip. Did she cut the nest herself? She did. Wonderful. But beautiful. Thank you very much. So, Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. We've heard many stories during the past week about the impact Her Majesty the Queen made on people in countries right across the world. Having been born in Ireland in the south and grown up there, I can relate personally and also from a national perspective. My mother was born 7 days after Queen Elizabeth and named Elizabeth after her. I think because my mother was so close in age to the Queen, every royal event was significant to my family. We marked the royal milestones, celebrating the Queen's jubilees and royal weddings and mourning her family's losses. And like so many people across the world, we felt a connection with the Queen and with the royal family. And we certainly never missed the Queen's speech on Christmas Day. That connection has continued. And despite never meeting the Queen, that connection explains the deep sadness that I and many have felt in our collective sense of loss. In 2011, the Queen made a much larger impact on my country of birth when she made an historic 4-day state visit to Ireland. This was hugely significant as it was the first state visit of a British monarch to Southern Ireland in 100 years, and the first visit since Ireland had gained independence from Britain. At the time, there was a nervousness in both countries about how the Queen would be received by the people of Ireland. However, the moment the Queen laid a wreath and bowed her head in the National Garden of Remembrance, paying her respects to the rebels who'd fought against the British in 1916, and when she opened her address at the state dinner in Dublin Castle in Gaelic, speaking in Irish, with the words, Uachtaráin agus a Carda, President and friends, she melted the hearts of the people. The visit was hugely successful, and crowds, including my mother, turned out to see her. Such was the impact of her gestures and moving words during her visit to Ireland, that the Queen has been hailed as a facilitator of the peace process in Ireland, and her visit to Ireland has been described as healing and incredibly important to Anglo-Irish relations. Queen Elizabeth II's dedication to service, the dignity with which she carried out her duties, and the impact she made around the world is an example to all of us. May she rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. Thank you very much for reminding us about the Queen's speech on Christmas Day. And again, I think going back to what someone said earlier, that ties us all with our past. And I think one gets very emotional at that moment, remembering our family who's been around us and perhaps we've lost over those years. It's just been so long. And even to this day, we stop eating, even though it's recorded earlier, we still watch it at 3 o'clock. So thank you very much for that reminder. Councillor Jones next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The residents of Buntingford that I represent here today are deeply saddened with the loss of our Queen that has devoted her entire life to serving this great nation here in the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. She had her fair share of difficult situations, and we all remember Annus Horribilis, but she came through that period seamlessly and was rewarded with the hearts of the nation. During my career as a professional photographer, both press and corporate, as the same as Councillor Muir, I was honoured to have photographed Her Majesty on many occasions, and I would like to share with you today my favourite image up on the screen. This was taken during her Golden Jubilee year as a press image. This image to me just characterises her personality and the pleasure that she has in meeting the public, who always gather in vast numbers to just catch a slight glimpse of her. Another photographic opportunity came when she visited Hertfordshire in June 1995, as Sharon Taylor was mentioning, to open the new Glaxo Wellcome site. It was then the R&D facility built on Gunnerswood Road. I was honoured to be the official photographer for that event for Glaxo Wellcome. I'd photographed the construction of this state-of-the-art facility over the years of its construction, and it was a pleasure for me to photograph the Queen tour the facility and give it her seal of approval by planting a tree and unveiling a commemorative plaque that she must have done many, many thousands of times. When I heard the news, my final memory of being in the Queen's presence was attending her garden party in 2018 as chairman of East Herts Council. That was a wonderful event. I wasn't important enough to actually be on the receiving line to meet her, but just being in her presence, and it was such a fabulous day and weather. It was an absolute privilege to be there. And when I heard the news last Thursday of the death of the Queen, I was in Limoges in France at my son's wedding. It was the day of his the civic service. We'd just left the civic service when we heard the news. So it was certainly a day of mixed emotions. And for sure, we will never forget my son's wedding anniversary. God save the King.
Well, Councillor James, thank you so much for sharing that most beautiful photograph. It does capture Her Majesty implicitly, and I'm sure we'll use that when we send this recording to the Palace on the front page. So thank you very much for that. You're wonderful. Councillor Bell, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I won't have, and I don't have lots of personal memories, but I think it's honoured that we've been able to listen here today to so many from members here. It's right that we are able here in this place, as representatives of the 1.2 million residents of Hertfordshire, to pay due tribute to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Her reign of 70 years will probably never be seen again, as it spanned many generations and probably more scientific and cultural changes in the nation's life than ever before. As others nationally and here have stated, in the many changes that have happened since 1952, the one constant was Queen Elizabeth. Whether it was the Queen's speech setting the parliamentary agenda or the Christmas broadcast, as others have also mentioned, this nation of many differing views expected and got that continuity of service from the Queen, whatever the political or natural storms beyond. Her example of putting public service and duty selflessly above everything else is rightly what she ultimately will and should be remembered for. If we as elected public figures here in this chamber and across the country for that matter could live up to even half of what Queen Elizabeth did in her public life and earn the respect that she did for fulfilling her duty, then the country and the world would be a better place. God save the King.
Thank you so much, Councillor Bell, and you make such a point of the example of public duty. It's a very girly thing, but those of we who perhaps have been mayors or chairs perhaps have got a year or 2 years where we have to dress smartly and do our hair when we go to events. She did that every day. I mean, even on the day of the last day we saw her, her hair was done. Her stamina must be absolutely extraordinary. So thank you very much for your wonderful words there. Now I'm going to ask Councillor Graham, please.
Madam Chairman, thank you. I was director of the Royal British Legion for some years and was very honoured in that post to meet the Queen through attendance at the Festival of Remembrance. But my strongest memory, we've already had referred to, was the royal visit to Dublin in 2011. Do you remember the green dress as she walked through the streets of Dublin? As we already heard from Councillor Thompson, there was a degree of nervousness in the air about how well she would be received. And there she was, at aged 85, walking down the streets of Dublin, wearing a green dress. I saw that as a very courageous action, and what a brave woman to do it. May she rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. I think we're just starting to understand quite how wise she was and the little things that she did during her reign, that we can see how important and how she changed things that happened in the world in a very, very clever way. So thank you very much for that reminder. I think I've got 7 speakers left. So just to remind everybody, in case anybody hasn't pressed their button who would like to speak. So Councillor Ranger next, please.
Thank you, Chair. It feels impossible to articulate a fitting tribute to a life extraordinary. Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth has been the nation's figurehead throughout some of history's most darkest and most joyous moments, our constant in a world of perpetual change. Watching the footage over the last week has reminded me once again how she's been at so many moments in both our national and global history, and the grace and dignity in which our nation has been represented. There is not a Christmas I remember without her. The presents, the family moods, and the triumph of the turkey were always in doubt, but her reflections, observations, and annual message was without fail a source of familiarity, comfort, and gentle wisdom. A stable, constant presence, which each year brought a time-old tradition in. Families and their generations, as we have heard, all huddled around one TV together. Much has changed in her 70-year reign, but for 70 years, so many of us have simply huddled. All around radios, black and white, colour, and now flat screen TVs, to hear that familiar voice say something to make us all feel a little better, give us a renewed hope for tomorrow, for a better tomorrow, to share in our gratitude or joy, or just a national well done. As many of us know, public service is its own reward, but it's not always easy. And the admiration I have for her 70 years of service, dedication of self, an unwavering commitment and a sincerity to the nation and the Commonwealth is awesome and an unparalleled gift for us to have been given and to have received. Her legacy is long and enduring. The visceral desire so many of us feel at this time to visit her homes, pay tribute, or do whatever we are able to pay our respects shows it shall be so. She will be missed and our world forever changed because of her, and now sadly without her. God save the King.
Thank you very much, Councillor Arena, and thank you for reminding us the darkest and the joyous, the triumph and the disasters of life. She's been with us for all of those as an amazing constant. Thank you so much for your words. Now, may I turn to Councillor Tyndall, please?
Thank you, Chair. I find myself being very moved today because of the variety of comments, both personal and even from those who are younger than some of us, who were not able to cause personal reflections, but still were able to articulate their appreciation of the Queen. I go back a bit further than that, and I would like to start the journey because I can remember my father took me to the lying in state of Queen Mary of Teck in March 1953, who is Queen Elizabeth's grandmother. He was a serving soldier who joined in 1928, so he actually had an affinity with her, who was the George V's consort, and that was my first engagement with the royal family. I don't remember an awful lot about it except the long wait, but there we are. Obviously, that was followed by much more joyous celebrations at the coronation, where there was a fantastic street party. Moving forward in time, although I attended two garden parties some 25 years apart, I never had the pleasure of speaking to the Queen, although I did see her from afar. However, as a trade union officer responsible for a number of years for the gardeners, firemen and other specialised staff in the royal household, I was often in Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle and heard stories from my members of the Queen's kindness and humanity to the staff and everybody who came into contact with her. The one downside of visiting Buckingham Palace, of course, was if you were walking in the gardens, you could come across a corgi, and you were always warned to be well advised to keep out their way because they treated it as their own preserve and often nipped people's ankles. But of course, they were far away at the garden parties. Moving on to more pleasant times, I bringing the story completely up to date. I currently look after members at RAF Northolt, which has been much in the news recently, and my members have actually witnessed the Queen's last journey as she came down from Scotland. Her Majesty will be sorely missed, but we have to look forward to His Majesty King Charles III, and I'm sure his reign will be as special as hers were, perhaps in a different way, but just as much loved by the population. And God save the King.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Tyndall. Amazing 1953 memory. So that's absolutely wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. Very much indeed. I love the thought it was a long wait. We have councillors in this chamber who I think have waited in line already to see Her Majesty's coffin, and also saw her coming back to Buckingham Palace. So well done to those of you who've stood out for many, many hours. I'm now going to ask Councillor Guest, please.
Madam Chairman, The sad news about the Queen last Thursday was a shock to everyone. It feels like every household in the land has lost a loved one. Her selfless service is an example to all. The Queen inspired a tremendous sense of community. In the 1980s, she visited Lowestoft, the town where I grew up. Crowds flocked to the local park, Nicholas Everett Park, where she visited. I attended with my French pen friend who was visiting with a friend of his. There were crowds of people there. A lot of young people attended wearing Union flag face paint. And years later, this June, we celebrated her Platinum Jubilee. On the way through my division to the lighting of the beacon in another park, Gadebridge Park in Hemel Hempstead, I met a family coming the other way, having been to the Platinum party in the park. The man said, they're all in high spirits. The man said, "Ignore us, we're being silly. Happy Jubilee." That was the joy that the Queen inspired. The Queen had amazing attention to detail. A former colleague of ours, Barbara Lamb, told me how when she had her investiture for her MBE, the Queen said to her, "You were a nurse." It was only 3 months ago that we celebrated the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Only 3 months ago, but it seems like an age. Now we are mourning her passing. Rest in peace, Your Majesty. In the words of the Bible, well done, good and faithful servant. Long live the King. God save the King.
Thank you so much, Councillor Guest. And you're absolutely right. We do all feel that we've lost a member of our own family. Thank you for that. Those wonderful words. Thank you. I'm going to now ask Councillor Lloyd. I think yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for organising this event. I'm one of those who didn't have much sleep last night, having been up in London and got back on the last train. I was fearing that I might be sleeping at Euston, but was very grateful. And I've really treasured the memories that all of you have shared this morning. It has helped me. The last week has not felt real. We all knew it was coming, but my early memories are 1966, the Queen presenting the World Cup. I was too young to even realise the significance of England winning the World Cup. I thought we'd be doing it every year. I was more interested in kicking a football in the garden, but I did come in at the end. But then later that year, picking up on what Councillor Ranger said, we have had the high points and we have the tragedy of Aberfan, which we have been thinking about. The Queen was there to visit, to console individual communities at many, many times over her life of service. She has touched the life of millions. I've had photos from Adelaide, from relatives who have shown me of the Queen displayed on buildings, from other family members with a half mast in Washington for the Queen. I had, it was one of my Australian relatives who was the first to be laying flowers outside Buckingham Palace on Thursday. My brother was there on Friday. By the time I went up on Saturday, you couldn't actually get that close to the palace. We were in Green Park joining the many other people. But the comment of the smile on so many of the photos both shared today, I think is something which we will remember for the rest of our lives. So let us try and smile and learn from that example. But I was with friends last Thursday as the news came through that all the royal family were travelling. And those friends, over 30 years ago, he was being ordained as a minister in Warwick. And I had to take my daughter, who was probably only a few months old, out of that service. And I went and walked into Warwick town centre, not to realise that I was going to see the Queen coming out of a wedding that she had been at. And to be able to tell my daughter, yes, under a year old, you saw the Queen. I was a little bit older when I saw the Queen at my first test match at Lord's. Her love of sport, obviously of racing and many other things, has been part of what she has brought to our national life. And then as we reflect closer, her daughter, Anne, has shown that service. She has supported Save the Children Fund since probably her early 20s or maybe younger as its patron. And she travelled down and saw all the tractors lined up as she came down through the Highlands, all the ponies lined up at the side of a road, accompanied her mother. You know, it's personal grief for them as well. And I'm sure that they are all grieving as we did when we had lost parents for Philip and all the things that he did. I think we should remember those. The Duke of Edinburgh Award, what he did for the World Life Fund of Nature, the Plainfields Association, and many more. We need to remember them both. Over 70 years of marriage, most of us will probably not get there. And it is amazing. But in 2016, as Councillor Button mentioned, that was probably the last visit of the Queen. But one thing I think I would like you to think about, Chairman, is I think we need to have a collected memory of all the different visits, because some of the ones I've heard about today, I didn't know about. We need to bring that together in some form, whether it's electronic or in a book, so that future generations of children and people in Hertfordshire will remember and be able to learn from the memories that we have shared today. And as I was in London yesterday, when we look at post boxes and we walk down the street, we will be able to remember the Queen. I saw a blue one outside St Thomas's, where our daughter works. I saw a gold one near Westminster Abbey. I saw the ordinary red one. We're not going to see any new ones, but we can still remember her. Few of us carry coins these days. I was surprised I actually had one in my pocket. We can remember her then. We will still have stamps that we haven't used. But I think one of the most poignant memories is at her husband's funeral, sitting on her own during COVID. So as I was reflecting this morning, listening to you all speaking, I am just so grateful that we haven't got COVID. But I could have been one of the thousands there yesterday. My son-in-law was one of those who couldn't get there. They stopped you going. So actually, there would have been even more people. He was there in Hyde Park, as were many other thousands, where they laid on a big screen. And obviously, Councillor Thompson mentioned the reconciliation of her visit to Ireland. That, I think, considering Mountbatten, he was killed the day before my then fiance's 21st birthday. And her visits to Northern Ireland, her shaking hands with McGuinness. I think reconciliation is something that all of us need to consider. We need to learn from her example and work together for the best of Hertfordshire. And as has been mentioned, the Queen's Green Canopy. For me, it was special to be with the Lord Lieutenant, because I'd looked at all the other trees we had on Croxley Green for our previous monarchs, and I've been saying for years, I want to see one for the Queen Elizabeth on Croxley Green. So to be there was very, very special. And obviously we've had many jubilees street parties even this year, so many in Hertfordshire. So thank you for your inspiration and making sure we made it special. Tough times. We saw the fires at Windsor and at Hampton Court. And you could see how, you know, if any of us had lost our homes or part of our homes, the devastation that must bring. But also the fun times that have been mentioned of Bond and of Paddington, her sense of humour. But probably the nearest I ever got, and I can still fit inside my shirt when I was a Queen Scout, was parading in front of her at Windsor Castle. Yeah, I was reflecting. I will go to Windsor again this year and remember that. And like many of you, the garden party, she's opened up our homes. But it's actually her we should be saying thank you to. The example of service. And it's all changed in a week. A week. You know, we have a new king. Thank you for organising the event to help us be part of history, which ties back to how the Anglo-Saxons affirmed their king. Obviously, in this case, we only have one person being put forward. In the past, you know, it was a little bit more complex. But I do want to say thank you again to all my fellow councillors. You have helped me this morning in coming, and I will continue over the next 4 days to reflect on the life of the Queen and to give thanks for her outstanding leadership, her services, the broadcasts, her life of faith. And as I was listening, I remembered the one time I saw our King was when you mentioned Ascot, and I saw him playing polo those many years ago. So I'd like to join with all of you and the sentiment in saying, God save the King, and thank you for such an amazing Queen and a life well lived. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, thank you, Councillor Lloyd. You indeed have helped us in the chamber with touching on so many aspects perhaps that we hadn't thought of. I'm with you, the Pony Club, the tractors and combines lined up by that road. I mean, that was just one of the most fantastic images of everyone coming together. But thank you so much for those memories. Councillor Bibby, please.
Madam Chair, I suppose my allegiance to the Queen stems from the fact I was born on her Jubilee year, 1953. And it's no coincidence that my name's Philip, because I was named after Prince Philip. I'm lucky, really. It could have been Elizabeth, but it wasn't. And my wife's abiding memory is that she used to work at North Hants College. Apart from the opening, the Queen came on a private visit, and Cathy can now boast, and she always does boast, she had lunch with the Queen, so she always remembers that. But I just wanted to touch on something that I don't think's really been truly acknowledged in this meeting here. I was talking to a friend a while ago, or a few days ago, and he said, I'm not a royalist. I can't do all this stuff. I said, you don't need to be a royalist to recognise and appreciate what the Queen, what the monarchy has done for this country. The way they've conducted themselves on the world stage, they've given us massive prestige, and I'm not sure that we'd be so well regarded on the world stage if it wasn't for their contribution. So I thank the late Queen Elizabeth for her duties and her actions overseas, and I trust that King Charles III will continue that. So long live the King. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bibby. Sure your wife doesn't always brag, does she? Councillor Hill, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It is with great sadness that I rise to pay tribute personally and on behalf of residents within my division to Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. There have been so many lovely memories shared this morning, and I would like to give thanks for the Queen's amazing work and dedication to duty, always carried out with such dignity, kindness and complete selflessness throughout her life, not only as the monarch, and head of the Commonwealth, but as a wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. She was loved dearly and will be greatly missed. My thoughts are with King Charles and the whole royal family at this very sad time. God bless the Queen and may she rest in peace. Long live the King and God save the King. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. That was beautiful. Thank you. Councillor Adden, please.
Thank you. I just want to touch on a couple of things. The first time I ever saw the Queen, I never actually met her. I waved at her many times. But the very first time was when I was, we'd just come back from Bahrain and we went to live at RF Valley on Anglesey. And I was even smaller than I am now. And the Prince of Wales had been invested at Carnarvon Castle. And all the people in the village came up to the A5 and we all waved frantically with our Welsh flags as the Queen and Prince Charles went by on their journey to Holyhead as part of the procession. I waved many flags over the years because she was always coming to various military things that I was at growing up in the Air Force. But obviously, sadly, I never met her. I'd just like to mention, a couple of people have mentioned Scouting this morning. Just so that everybody is aware, she was the patron of the Scout Association. So as the Scout Association, one of the representatives in the chamber, I'd just like to acknowledge that as well. Sharon mentioned about we'll always remember the day that she died. And we will, like other things that have happened in our lives. I can remember where I was when Elvis Presley died and things like that. But the day that the Queen died is something that we will never forget. I got the news on a WhatsApp message from my son. It's very simple. He's very to the point that the Queen is dying. This was at lunchtime. I was at work. I work at Lockers Park School in Hemel Hempstead. It's a prep school, and it was our first day of term, and I run the uniform shop. So you can imagine on the first day of term how absolutely chaotic it was in my world that day. The whole school was buzzing. It was the first day back. Everybody was happy. We were having so much fun. I ran upstairs to speak to one of our matrons who I know is as passionate about the royal family as me. And we sat there having a quiet moment of reflection. I think we had the radio on in the background. So when the news came through and I was still at work, my first thought was to run up and see Miss Harrison and in case she hadn't heard yet. And the first thing she said to me was, "We've got to lower the flag. We've got to lower the flag." Well, we have this magnificent flagpole where the very flag, I said, I can do that. I'm a scout leader. I do this all the time. And what I hadn't realised was it's a tubular flagpole, which is locked. So then we had this mad panic about how we were going to lower the flag. And it was so important to me that this flag was lowered immediately. So it involved a phone call to the manager of the maintenance team, who was on a cruise somewhere. Luckily, he picked the phone up to find out where the key was. So we ran outside, and the boys still didn't know. The boys at school were still running around, having fun, getting ready for supper. And we lowered the flag. There were only about 3 members of staff that were still there. But that's my memory of the day that she died. I will never forget the honour of lowering the flag at school. I'd like to just say, though, that I would much prefer, and I'm sure everybody would as well, to not remember the day that she died, but to remember 3 months ago the incredible celebrations across the country where everybody was just having street parties and loving the fact that our Queen had reigned for 70 years. So I think we should really try and keep that the foremost of our memories. I'd just like to finish by saying, on behalf of the residents of Hemel Hempstead South East, thank you to Her Majesty for being the most amazing role model and a constant in our lives. Long live the King.
Thank you very, very much. I think many of us remember doing our do my duty to, and can't remember it exactly, but thinking of everyone in the Scout and Guide movement. Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now, Councillor Jarvis, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid I can't add to any of the amazing experiences that other members have recounted this morning relating to the Queen, but as I've never met her, and in fact, I've never even waved at her. And I also can't match the recollections that some members have of the start of the Queen's reign, because until last Thursday, her reign had encompassed my entire life. And I think that made me think about the way in which the world and Britain had changed during that time, and the way in which the Queen had balanced the need for continuity and tradition with the need to reflect the changes in the world and society in which we lived. And that's one thing which I think she did very well. I think she recognised that the monarchy and the country needs both tradition and change. And I think that in so many areas, she got that balance right. And I think that we've heard many descriptions of the great pleasure that her visits to various parts of the country brought to people. But I think we also need to reflect the way in which she changed this country, the way in which she made us some of the things that we are, and the things that will endure beyond the end of her reign. Now, clearly the King will change some things, but I think that many of the things that the Queen has made this country will continue beyond the end of her life. And in many respects, that's even more important than the pleasure she gave us in visits and things of that sort. So I think we should reflect on how she has contributed to the sort of country that we live in.
Thank you, Councillor Jarvis. You're absolutely right. I'm convinced that the most important thing for Her Majesty is what will endure after her reign. She was perfection in death as well as in life, right to the end. She did everything, including dying in Scotland, to be able to give the Scottish people that very special time. And I'm sure that's the most important legacy that she could possibly have prayed and dreamed of. So thank you very much for that. I've got a couple more councillors have put their names. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Councillor Deering, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I never met the Queen, but I feel that I did. And this is because I think at the Remembrance Sunday last year, which I think was the first Remembrance Sunday following lockdown, when I was still the Mayor of Hertford, we had, as we always do in Hertford, a very, very splendid and moving Remembrance Sunday. And on this occasion, we were joined by the Lord Lieutenant Robert Voss and Lord Salisbury, and in the quite correct British way of behaviour, after Remembrance Sunday, we convened in the castle, which you've all seen on the screen earlier, for a cup of tea. And because we had the Lord Lieutenant with us and Lord Salisbury, and some speeches had been given, I gave a few words as well. And in respect of the Lord Lieutenant being with us, I found myself saying that the people of Hertford, and I hope I can include my fellow Hertford County Councillor in this, Ben, that the people of Hertford had enormous respect for the Queen. And then I found, because it seemed that the moment was right, I went on to say that actually the people of Hertford love the Queen. And of course, because I'm British, I immediately thought that I'd overstepped the mark. I'd lost my reserve and embarrassed everyone in the room. But that feeling lasted for a nanosecond. There was a great surge of approval. Alderman Ruffles was there, clapping, acknowledgement that actually the people of Hertford did love the Queen. And I think we now know that the people of this country loved the Queen. And like many, many, many people, I suspect millions of people, again, Councillor Crystal touched on this, speaking personally,
I've been very surprised at how struck I've been by the loss of the Queen. It's made me immensely sad. And I've been wondering why it's had this effect on me. And I think it's because through her loss, we've come to realise what she did for us. 70 years of duty. And as Annie says, as the mayor, I was the mayor for a couple of years, you have to get yourself up in the morning. As Annie says, do your hair. A bit of a problem for me sometimes. But the Queen has been doing that, or was doing that, for 70 years. It's phenomenal. The sense of duty is phenomenal. The lesson for all of us is phenomenal. And I would just like to pay my personal respects and the respects, if I may, with you, Ben, of the people of Hertford for everything that the Queen did for us. We do love the Queen, and I wish King Charles III all the very best. God save the King.
Thank you very much, Councillor Deering. Yes, we are now realising quite what she's done for us all. Thank you. Councillor Mason, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And like Councillor Chris Lloyd, I also queued through the night to pay my respects to the Queen last night, and it was a most moving experience, and it's the least I could do in recognition of what a great monarch she was for us. Queen Elizabeth, or Princess Elizabeth, on her 21st birthday, pledged that she would dedicate her life, be it long or short, to the service of her country and its people. She stood good to that promise, Madam Chairman, and for that I would like to thank her for everything she's done for us and her dedication and service, and may she rest in peace.
Thank you so much, and well done for last night. We've had a brief word. I think you've had an hour's sleep, so and you stayed awake in the council chamber, so it must be really important. Councillor Doris, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. About 40 years ago, I found myself working for P&O, and I found myself arriving in Auckland in New Zealand, and we got off the ship and wandered into town, and there was a bit of commotion in the shopping centre. And so I stood and waited and looked, and lo and behold, the Queen came through. And she went up the stairs and she met various people and so on and so forth. And about 3 hours later in the afternoon, I wandered away and done a few things and was standing on the roadside, and there was nobody else there. And all of a sudden, a police motorcyclist came by, and then the Queen came by. So I waved at her, and I'll swear that she waved back. And that's the first time actually we've laughed this morning. And it's great because one of the abiding memories that everybody has, and I have fortunately been in her presence, but I've never met her, was her great sense of humour, even typified with James Bond and with Paddington, but her whole attitude and humorous nature and little quirks and little side issues and words that she said in her various speeches. And that's a great thing. We will miss her terribly. But whilst we mourn for her passing, we must look forward to the future. And I'm very proud of the fact that I actually have met King Charles III when he was Prince Charles, when he came as a guest of Lord Salisbury to Hatfield to look, would you believe, at the new Hatfield station that had been repurposed and rebuilt, together with actually a very attractive multi-storey car park. And he came along and I met him, and I'm so proud of that. And the final thing I would say is that last Thursday at about 2:15, I was walking along to go to a meeting in Hemel Hempstead. And you know, everybody can say, I was there at, whether it was the Twin Towers, whether it was the murder of President Kennedy,
whatever it may be. But walking along in Hemel, there was this absolute stillness. And I can't tell you what it was, but there was a stillness in the air, and you knew something was happening. And then at 6:30, we knew that it had. But we look forward to the King Charles III. God save the King.
Thank you, Councillor Doris, and we look forward to many invitations for our new King to come to Hertfordshire. Indeed, thank you. Two more. Councillor Hart next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On behalf of all my residents of Waltham Cross, I would like to thank Her Majesty the Queen for her 70 years of loyal service and duty to this country and the Commonwealth. There's an outpouring of grief where residents are laying flowers and signing the Book of Condolences within the Borough of Broxbourne and across the county. My deepest sympathies and condolences go to all members of the royal family at this sad time. God save the King.
Thank you so much, Councillor Hart. And I know even councillors who are not speaking, they've already told me that they would like their wishes and tributes from their residents to actually be included in this meeting. So thank you to all of those of you who've spoken to me. Councillor Hiscox, please.
Thank you, Chair. My memories of the Queen, who I never met, mainly from all the photographs in my whole life that I've seen, starting from my first day at primary school, there was the picture of the Queen. Going on to when I worked in Sweden for the British Council, and there was the picture of the Queen. Coming back to council offices, that's in my life. Those photographs have always been in my memory of her from a very young Queen going through to some of the pictures now, the photographs of her in our state buildings when she is older. And what an influence she has had on all our lives, but also what an influence she has had on the world stage. And that was sort of personified for me because I happened to be very lucky to be able to see the hearse that brought her body back to Buckingham Palace the other night. And I was standing for 3 hours in the rain with a group of wonderful people, one from Israel, one from Czechoslovakia, one from Ireland, one from Poland, and 2 of us from England. And they were a little group because we were so together for so long with all our umbrellas dripping on one another. And they were there. They didn't live here. The lady from Czechoslovakia did. But they had come, one was over for a conference, the lady from Israel, and various other things. They were there to pay their respects because they actually loved our Queen and all the things she had done, not only for our country, but for their countries too, and the visits she had made all over the world. So I just want to say thank you, ma'am. Thank you for everything you have done for us in this country, but thank you also for what you have done for the people of the world. And may you rest in peace, and God save the King. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Scott, and thank you for sharing your experience. It was a couple of nights ago now. This week's been a very long week, hasn't it? And hearing about people from all over the world. And I thank Councillor Lloyd for the photographs you shared with me of your relations in other countries as well. It's wonderful to know that we're all grieving together. Do I have any? I don't have anybody else on my screen here. So has everybody said what they'd like to say? Oh, Councillor Thake.
Madam Chairman, an explanation perhaps came from Her Majesty at a former moment of sadness in her life. The price of love is grief, which is probably why we're all so sad today.
Thank you so much. How wise, how wise, how wise. I'd just like to share with you where I was when I heard of Her Majesty's death. I was about to cut a ribbon on the community gym in Wheathampstead, and literally about to do it. And the young personal trainer came up and said, the Queen has died. And we have a 48-page document telling us what to do when the Queen dies. And guess what? I didn't quite know what to do. But there was an elderly gentleman there, ex-serviceman, who stood up and said, we've just lost our, I think it's called a commander-in-chief, is that right? And I'd like to toast the Queen. And there we are. He knew what to do, which is absolutely wonderful, trained to perfection. But I'll just share a couple of glamorous moments. I'm going to talk about crowns. I was very fortunate to be at the state opening of Parliament a couple of years ago, and it was the first year where the crown, would you remember, the crown was a little bit heavy for Her Majesty, and it was carried on a cushion. And just to watch the sparkle of it, I think we saw a little bit on the television yesterday to see the sparkle of that. Equally, I was invited to a staff party at Buckingham Palace in the Golden Jubilee. And at the end of the dinner, the royal family walked through, and yes, she was wearing another crown, and minute, and the crown looked almost as big as she did. So that was a wonderful. I was fizzing for months after that. But I think it's also sad that we tend to remember people when they die for their recent years. And it's really important we remember her as a young girl. And my mother was a captain in the army. And when she was serving in Scotland in the ATS, same as Her Majesty, she came to inspect the troops. And my mother, being a similar size, was actually asked to stand in at the dress rehearsal. And so from that moment on, I think we've got to remember she was the it girl. She was, she for her peers. How many of you, either your mothers or grandmothers, have that hairstyle their whole lives? And so I think it's really important we remember, and that's been instilled with me, as I think all of you, from our parents, how important the monarchy is. And I hope and pray that what we're living through now and the wonderful images and information of this extraordinary life is actually something that is going to then be bred through our future generations. It's a long time since anyone has experienced a change of monarchy, and to see the children up in London and the comments and in Scotland that they're making, it's really heartening for us all. So I'd like to thank you all for your astonishing recollections and tributes. It's by far superseded what I think we'd expected this morning, and it just reflects the passion and love that you all have and had for Her Majesty. And with that, I would like us to stand and sing the National Anthem, please. My choices gains in store, on him be pleased to pour. Long may he reign. Thank you, Thank you very much, everyone. And I would like to invite you all up to the ballroom to share some refreshments. Thank you very much.